maybe this a is not defined and this is something like this. So this becomes more appropriate example now. Okay, so now there is this function f2 is defined inside the block of function f1. f1 च्या आत त्याची definition केलेली आहे. I'm calling it inside the block itself. That block च्या आतच मी f2 ला call करतोय and f2 is going to return a. This function is also going to return a. When I make the call to function f2, complicated आहे, असा complicated scenario खूप कमी वेळा येतो, but to understand the concept of variable and its scope or function and its scope, we are writing this thing. Okay, now consider that when I reach this line number 6 for execution, this variable a, okay, so this a, the name a is associated with a different variable than ये line number 3 पे जो variable a है उसके. Okay, but when I'm executing this internal code, जब मैं ये internal code execute कर रहा हूँ, at that time is this a alive? No, this a is not alive. Why it is not alive? Because when I come to execution of f2, I stop executing f1. When I come to execution of f2, I stop executing f1 and then I go to execute f2. While I am executing f2, the variable a that I have defined outside of f2 is not accessible inside it. Okay, so this a I will always be evaluating as a compiler or as a program executor. This expression a is equal to b plus c will always assign b plus c value, that is 30 plus 10 40 value, to this a and not to this a. ये आपको पता है क्योंकि आपने C programming language सीखी है. Okay, this happens because the binding between name a and this value 10 and the memory address where these two things are associated with, that binding is disassociated when I call function f2, because inside f2 this variable binding is not having scope. Okay, so what is a lifetime of a variable? A lifetime of a variable is point when it gets created up to point when it gets destroyed. तो ये a destroy कब होगा? जब मैं ये subroutine से बाहर निकलूंगा. Because this is a subroutine, there will be another function called as main probably, which will be calling this function, right? Wherein we will be calling this function. So I will be calling f1 here from the main. So whenever I call f1 from main, this will come to life. This variable will get created. The association of name a to the memory address of 4 bytes will be done. Value 10 will be assigned to that those memory addresses that will be stored over there in those memory addresses. But that will be disassociated when I reach to line number 13. Because in the line number 13, I'm making call to f2 function. So while I am executing line number 13 and I have just made call to f2, and I'll start executing from here onwards. And as I execute these steps, my earlier binding that was created, the association of name a to that memory address and the values, that is currently disassociated. So temporarily the variable does not remain live until I execute this line number 13 of the subroutine f1. Once that line is over and I have a return value, this association re-exists. It starts all over again. Okay, so now please understand scope of variable a, this one that is outside of the f2. So I would refer to this variable a as outside of f2. Okay, and this a as inside of f2. Okay, to distinguish them from each other. Okay, तो ये outside of f2 वाला जो a है उसका अगर आप lifetime देखोगे तो when you are executing any of the steps between step number 5 to step number 12 or line number 5 to line number 12, it won't be live. Okay, but when you're executing step number 1, 2, 3, 4 or 13, 14, 15, it will be live. Okay, inside f2 wala jo a hai, that variable is going to be live when we enter f2, that is from line number 5 till we exit f2, that is line number 12. So this is the lifetime of the inside f2a, and lifetime of outside f2a is these three lines and these three lines. Okay, whenever I'm executing this stuff, the outside f2a is not live. So this is how a compiler would also require to understand when a binding is live, when the binding is not live. Okay, so that is about a binding of a variable, because it is easier to give you an example of a variable. I'm giving you an example of a variable, but you need to understand that a compiler, when it is compiling a code, and when I actually execute the machine code in that phase as well, a programming language needs to understand what exactly is the lifetime of a particular object. And if the object is live, then only I should be able to refer it to that particular object. So I can always refer to a programming object when it is live. What do I say that when do I say that object is live? Whenever there is a time between the creation and destruction of the name to object binding, that is called as the lifetime of the object. So object lifetime, please understand, is not a continuous time representation. My object may be live for certain duration of the time in the execution of a code, and during certain part execution of the code, the object may not be live. ओके तो ये कंटिन्यूअस नहीं रहता. अगर मैं ऑब्जेक्ट का लाइफ टाइम एक लाइन से, स्ट्रेट लाइन से दिखाना चाहता हूँ कि is my, say suppose in this example itself, here I want to say that is outer A alive, so मैं लिखता हूँ outer A live. Okay, so this line outer A is live. What about this line outer A is live? Yes, it is live. Okay, what about this place? It is live. Okay, but in this what about this line? It is live. What about this line? It is live. What about this line? It is live. So some sort of this kind of analysis your compiler needs to do in order to understand which variable has a scope while it is executing a certain part of the code, and while it is executing some other part of the code, what variable has a life. So now if I'm creating a chain of life for the variable A, you will see that this chain will break down at this line in the static code. So this is my static code. At the time of execution, whenever I am executing line number 1, so execution straight away में बहुत बार नहीं होता, बहुत बार में zigzag तरीके से होता है, जैसा यहाँ होगा. I'll start executing line number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 जैसा मैं line execute करूंगा, तो I would understand that it is just a definition of a function. So there is nothing to execute as such. I'll just pass on these lines. And as I reach this line number 13, I will realize that there is a function called made to function f2. And I will take my control back again over here. तो ये जो हो रहा है, that is execution trace. This is called as execution trace. So execution trace goes like this. I start with line number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Then back to 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Again 13, then 14, 15. This is the way this program is going to get